What's going on YouTube? My name is Calvin, I go by calsoscoped, and today I'm going to be breaking down this Cam Newton design pretty much group by group, just so you guys see my process and you'll definitely be able to learn a couple things within me doing that. So the first thing that I want to actually point out is that this was a collab with Jake Designs. He came up with the concept and everything, put all the concept pieces together, and then I went ahead and went in with the lighting. But I have the full PSD here, so let's get into the breakdown. So the first group that I want to just point out is my cam layer. I'm just gonna put a black background beneath it, just so we can see what's going on. And now let's just open it up, okay? So we got all these hue and saturation layers, but I'm going to go into the actual cam layer. This is a smart filter that I had. This is the first thing I worked on here. So what we decided to do is put rips in this jersey, and pretty much we did it with the polygonal lasso tool. We just made it with the polygonal lasso tool, but we were really careful on which way we wanted to rip the jersey. So that's just the easy way to make rips in your jersey. But to make it look realistic, we added a so we added hold on, I'm gonna make it a smart object. We added a 6-pack body, right? A 6-pack body. But the way that you change the color on this, because it wasn't originally dark skin, it was like a light skin body. But the way you're gonna do that is you would add like a black and white filter, but you would put it onto multiply, and then you could just adjust your layers here and there to make separate little adjustments. So that's a really easy way to make adjustments on your designs if you want to just make skin lighter, and if you want to make it brighter, it would be divide, but you would have to just go in and make different adjustments than this, obviously. Okay, so that's how we got to that for the 6-pack body. So I'm just gonna X out of that, and then we just did the rips. But then the shadowing, all we did for the shadowing is adding a levels, and see, without that shadow right there, without that levels adjustment, it doesn't look realistic. Now you add in that levels and it just looks completely real. So what you have to do on levels is kind of just pick a shade that you think is gonna look good. Like that would be too light, so you go to a darker shade and you can see it at first, and then if you're not confident in it, invert your mask so you can just see what it would look like without masking it out. And then you can mask out what you want with black, which hides, and white reveals. So white's gonna put on some of that levels and black is gonna hide it. And I would go with a hardness brush of 0 just to be sure, and just be careful when you're doing it, and just make sure you understand that you can add or subtract. It's not set in stone what you're doing, right? Alright, so that's what we did for that. And then I had to put a jersey over the top. Where is it? Yeah, we had to put a jersey over the top of him. So that was the jersey that's over the top, that's beneath, so that we can make the illusion of it's into the jersey. The rips are going onto the jersey. So that's how we did that layer. And I also added Topaz Labs. If you guys don't have Topaz Labs, I'm gonna drop a tutorial soon on Topaz Labs, but I used Topaz Labs, and I used the dynamic pop, and I used light pop smooth, and different variations. Because once you pick one of these, you can go to finishing touches and pick different types of brightnesses and all that type of stuff. So that's what we did on that. And then I'm just gonna close that out. Alright, so then we got the base of it. So here's where the fun really began. This is the blur, the motion blur that I put on the bottom of this. I actually added this after, but it's obviously on the bottom because you don't want motion blur on the top of him. So that motion blur is on the bottom. So for right now, we're just gonna just ignore that for right now, and let's see what we did. So I went in with a bunch of hue and saturations. I decided that I wanted my light source to be red from the top right and blue from the bottom left. So the easiest way to do this is actually going into a black background with no light, in my opinion, because you can really just alter your light however you really feel like, and then add the light after. And it might seem kind of weird at first when you're just adding lights on and you don't know really where they're gonna be at. But say if you're just picking a point, so I'll just make like a light. Like if you really get stuck, you could just add your own light in the background, something like this. You could just go like something like that, just add a light, and then you could just see where the parts are gonna hit. So obviously, if I don't have like an arrow or something, but if you're really just pointing out where it's gonna hit, it would be like hitting a lot more here than up here. It's not gonna go all the way to the other side. Don't do that because that won't look realistic. So let's see what I did. For my first light, I added my very, very, very light tones, but they're harsh tones, but they're light at the same time, because I put my flow on my brush up to about 100 usually when I do the first hue and saturation layer. As you guys see, it's a hue and saturation, so I can change the color of the glow that I want to be on his body. So if I decolorize that, it just looks normal, but hue and saturation, and then put your saturation up to 0 for your first layer that you want to have the light on, and put your lightness up. And see, I could change this to any color on hue and saturation, but I stuck with red because that's what I wanted it to be. Actually, I'm looking at some of these colors and they look pretty cool. But so what I did is just paint on. So just paint on, put your hardness up pretty high, and don't be afraid to just paint some lights on, and you can always change them at the end. So say like I put those harshes on the edge, harsh lights on the edge. I'm just doing this for reference. I dropped my hardness down, my flow, to blend some of that out with black. See how it's not going to be as harsh when you start blending out your colors. So that's how I got that done. So that's how you're gonna do your lighting. Obviously your initial lighting. I'm trying to backspace. Alright, and then I got my supporting light on there. So this is the supporting light. On the supporting light layer, I went with my lightness back down to 0. Instead, you see it's really high up here. I went back down to 0, and then I brushed on some excess lights. So I just brushed on some excess lights. My flow is pretty low. See how I'm just brushing on excess lights. And like I said, you don't want your light sources to be reaching all the way to the other side. You could have like a couple, maybe I could have added a couple on the other side, just like slightly red over here or something like that, but not in this case. I didn't add that. Okay, and then for the second one, the blue lights, we did the same exact process. So put your hue and saturation on, clip it to your subject, and put your saturation up to 100. Your lightness is going to be up on the first one initially because that's the edge glow, so it's going to be the lightest glow. And then the subsequent ones, you're going to put your lightness back down to 0 or alter it somewhere where it's not as bright. And that's how you're going to get your lighting done on your source. That's a very easy way. I'm going to bring in a more in-depth tutorial on how I do that as well, but that's a very easy way how to do your lights. Okay, so now we have my behind camera Newton lights. So I'm going to hide that black layer again, and this is our background image. Our background image is right here. I'm going to make it a smart object so I can go into it and see what it was originally. This was our background image. It was like fire particles and just fire with, I like those little light flares, like that's really cool, and that's what our background image was. So we added just some adjustments to it. So levels, we added it to make it more dark in the darkness. Color balance was only a little bit over, it was only a little bit. And our hue and saturation, I just added a little bit more blue over here because I knew that light was going to be blue, that light source. And that's what we did for our background image. Lighting slash flares. The lighting slash flares were really fun to mess around with because I got my color lookup on there, and my color lookups are so go-to. You got to use color lookups. Like, you don't have to, but they really help you out. 3 strip is literally a default one that you can get, and then I also have just a bunch of other color lookups. So I'm gonna go without those right now, and you see before and then you see after. This is also with the color balance. Color balance also helped me out a lot because it just changed the color to what I really wanted it to be for that Patriot blue. So that was really cool to use. Also, we use levels. I use levels on the actual flares. These are the red and blue flares. So originally this is only just a flare of red, but I added a hue and saturation, and I put it on colorize, or actually, yeah, I put it on colorize so I could get into that blue with a mask, and with that mask I can color in my own flares that I really feel like need to be there. So that's how I did that part. And then I added levels onto some of them to make them brighter or less bright. But in this case, I pretty much just made them brighter with the white brushes to reveal that brightness on the levels. Okay, So that's how we did our lighting and flare. And then our final thing that we did was go into our camera raw filter, and camera raw filter does so many great things for you. So I'm just gonna open that up into our camera raw filter, and these were my settings. Obviously it's going to change for you if you're making a design, but I had -16 temp, -28. The biggest thing that helps you in camera raw is split toning. Split toning is a really good tool to use, because you can change your you can select your highlights that you want. So if you want highlights of like, let's just go with this, highlights of like red, and then you put your saturation up, it's going to be very red highlights, and your balance is what is going to change it, because on your shadows you can actually pick your shadow color that you want. So your balance is going to go in between your highlights and shadows. See how drastically that changes an image? It changes the image very quickly, so you got to be careful with what you're doing, but it's very good to use. Okay, and then our final thing that I did is I used blur gallery on here as well, and I used tilt shift. So if you go to filter, blur gallery, tilt shift is what I used on this. And tilt shift is really cool because if you see in between these lines is where nothing will be blurred. In between those two solid lines is where nothing will be blurred, and you can actually set your blurs. But the great thing about it is, like, you can really just set where you don't want things to be blurred, and actually how much it's going to be blurred between the lines. So these lines are going to separate the what would I call it, the gradient of blur. So if it's closer to a solid line, more blurred; farther away, it's going to be less blurred. So using blur gallery and the tilt shift is a really good option, especially even when you're just doing things that have a lot of pieces in it. Like if you're doing a composition, it has like mountains in the back and houses and things like that. Very good to use, and I would use it over Gaussian blur. Kind of just take Gaussian blur out of your mind for most things that you're going to use in Photoshop, because it's not going to help too much. So then we got our bottom vignette, or vignette, I don't know how to say it exactly, but let's just say vignette, I guess. And that just adds a little bit of substance to it. And then we just added our logos, Calsoscoped and Jake Design. That is very cool, and that's how I got this done. If you guys have questions, let me know. I'm gonna drop a lighting tutorial just specifically on lighting very soon, so be on the lookout for that. And this will be up on my Instagram if it's not already. And make sure you guys drop a like if this helped, and if you just liked how I broke down the design. Until next time, it's been calsoscoped. Everybody stay scoped, man. Peace.